For somebody who spends most of his time these days working on a political campaign, I don't talk that much about the Democratic primary, but I do, as perhaps unsurprisingly, I do have some ideas in the wake of the Iowa vote and in the heat of the campaign as it's now taking place on the Democratic side of the aisle. First of all, I guess as a general observation, I would say all the heat about the candidates' supporters, all the personal animosity that's being directed back and forth, seems to me to be a huge distraction from the issues we need to talk about. And I really, really want us to stay focused on the issues. I also want to talk more, and I want the people on the liberal side of the spectrum to talk more about what it means to be a pragmatic and politician in this day and age, in the year 2016, because we hear it a lot. In the closing days of the Iowa campaigning, Hillary Clinton did something interesting because she really adopted a lot of Bernie's rhetoric, and whether authentically or not, she was communicating outrage about certain issues and really sounding a little bit like Bernie himself. And yet she also said this, and this is a line of argument that is wholly embraced by her supporters. She said, campaigning at Iowa State University in Ames a couple weeks ago, she suggested that Bernie was making big promises that can't be fulfilled. This really echoes her campaign against Obama in 2008, saying that she also wished for, quote unquote, a magic wand to achieve a good agenda. Quote, that ain't the real world we're living in, end quote. Well, you know what? That gets to the heart of the matter for me, because the real world we were living in the 1950s, for example, was a real world in which an African American could not vote in the South and could not get decent housing in the North. Now, we have a long way to go to achieve full racial justice in this country, a long way to go, but the real world changed. And it changed because people believed it can be changed, and because they mobilized and they were resolute in their demand that it be changed. Now, the real world that we were living in the 1930s had no Social Security. Old people were largely doomed to a life of poverty. That wasn't the real world we were living in, but it's the real world we're living in today. Social Security needs to be strengthened, but we've come a huge, long way. She also Hillary Clinton told a group of Black Lives protesters a while back and she said, I'm not interested in changing hearts. I'm interested in changing laws. If there is one lesson of the past 8 years, it should be this. You can't change laws unless you change hearts so that people demand it, unless you change hearts so that people know that change is possible. Barack Obama tried it Hillary's way for 8 years. It didn't work. What's more, Democrats lost Congress and have no way in mind, as far as anyone can tell, to get it back. Why? Because they insist that the real world in which they don't have Congress and have no prospects for getting Congress, that's the real world we live in. Well, you know what? That ain't the real world in the world of practicality. The pragmatic approach: articulate an agenda for change, get Congress back. In the meantime, turn out those voters because they know you stand for them. That's the real world we live in.